Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Matthew Blum and this is the Medieval Academy. So today we're going to be talking about seppuku, the Japanese form of ritual suicide. So before we get started in talking about this topic, I just want to give you guys kind of a warning. If you can't tell by my sound of my voice, I am sick. I got an upper respiratory infection from my fiance and I don't feel good at all. I would much rather be laying in bed right now playing Dark Souls and drinking coffee. But I told you guys a video once a week, so a video once a week you shall have. So I'm trying to quickly crank through this and get this done with because I really don't feel good. So if there's a lot of jump cuts, it's because talking is difficult and I'm going to be coughing a lot, probably blowing my nose, nasty, sickly stuff like that. So if there's a lot of jump cuts, it's because I am sick, so I apologize for that. Hopefully we can get through this video and hopefully it can be of decent quality. So let's get started. So, seppuku. The reason for this video, and the inspiration behind this video, is because I have a tanto, which is used for seppuku, and if you look on my tanto blade, I have a little inscription, and on that inscription, what it says in kanji is, honor even in death. So what this inscription is saying is that it's better to die, but keep your honor, than to live, but live a life in shame. This was a very important core concept that the samurai held dear. Seppuku, or harakiri as it's known in the West sometimes, started and originated in the 11th or 12th century as a form of suicide on the battlefield. When seppuku really became kind of a ritualistic process was about the 15th century, and also became a form of capital punishment. So let's go ahead and start talking about that ritual and how that ritual was performed. So seppuku, or harakiri, in a ritual way, was started by the samurai or the daimyo, the ruling class. It was only for those people, it was not for common people. Would be started by the samurai first bathing. He would bathe and wash himself, and then he would dress himself in an all-white kimono, which would have an inner part and then have like an outer part, and it would be all white. He would then sit down and eat his favorite meal, whatever he wanted as his last meal before death. He would eat that. Then he would sit down in the seiza position, which if you're not familiar with Japanese martial arts or Japanese culture, it's like a really crappy Indian style. So what they do is they fold their legs underneath each other and kind of like sit on the bony top part of your feet, kind of like in almost like a V shape. So that is the seiza position. They'd sit in the seiza position, and then they'd have this kind of thin wooden table placed in front of them, and to the left of the table would be an empty sake cup. To the right of the table would be their blade, whatever they were using. So let me go ahead and grab mine. So they would use a tanto, and this is actually technically not correct historically because as a tanto it's correct, but as a tanto for seppuku it's not, because the tantos they used for seppuku would not have a suba or a crossguard, if you want to talk about the English term for it, but it's called a suba. They would not have a suba. It would just be kind of like the habaki and the fuchi kashira? I forgot which one is fuchi, which one's kashira, but it would just have those two parts. There would be no suba. So if they used a tanto, it would have no suba or no crossguard. And if they didn't use that, if it was a samurai, they would normally use their wakizashi, or their short sword version of the katana. That would be sitting on the right. And then in the center of the table would be what is called a washi. It's a piece of paper made of mulberry bark. And then they would have a writing utensil there. And then what they would do is a servant would come, and with their left hand they would pour the sake, and then the samurai would take the sake and drink it in 2 sips of 2 sips. He would finish it in 2 sips of 2 sips. So he'd drink it twice and then drink it twice and then be gone. The reason they did this is because if you drink it in 1 sip, it would show haste, or greed. He was just wanting to take the alcohol or the drink. But if you took it in 3 sips, it would be showing hesitation, like he was trying to draw out the ritual, like he was scared of what was about to happen. So they would do it in 2 sips of 2 sips, and then they would be done. Another reason that it was done in that kind of double-double is because 4, so double-double, 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 is also the word for death in kanji. So that was kind of another reason they did it. At least that's what I read from my source. So then after they finished their sake, what they would do is they would sit down and they would write what was called a death poem. And it was written in the waki style. What the waki style is, it's 5 lines of 5 syllables, 7, 7, 5, 7 syllables. And for their death poem, it was not what you would expect. You hear death poem, oh, a poem about death. No, it was not allowed to be about death. It was not allowed to be dark. It was not allowed to be frightening. They couldn't talk about, oh man, I really don't want to die. It had to be lighthearted. It had to be profound. It had to be tranquil. They had to talk about good things. They couldn't talk about the fact that they were about to die. So they would write this death poem in this walkie style, and then once they were finished, they would take off the outer part of their kimono, and they would tuck the sleeves in under their legs. And this was to keep their posture straight, so they wouldn't slouch during the ritual. Then the servant would then clear off the table, and they would put the table under their butt. And they would sit on the table, so they would be forward because of the kimono, and slightly forward because of the table. Then they would then take the blade, and they would stab it in the left side of their abdomen, and cut directly to the right. At this point, they would have a kaishikunin present, or a second, as it's called. Kaishikunin is the Japanese word. It would be their friend or their servant or someone present to help in the ritual. They would be armed with a katana, and then they would then finish off their master with a cut to the head. However, if you've watched The Last Samurai, or if you've watched anime or other Japanese movies and you've seen seppuku in those movies, a lot of the times the kaishikunin would just like swing down and the head would go flying, and that's wrong, okay? Unless it was a criminal, the head would not be fully severed. What the kaishikunin would do is they would strike with the katana, and they would cut all the way down until the last little flap of skin, and then they would stop their cut. So the kaishikunin had to be really good with the sword in order to stop that cut. And the reason they would do this is because seppuku was performed publicly, and it was performed in either a temple, a Buddhist temple. They would not perform it in a Shinto temple because they didn't want to desecrate the temple with blood or death. So it would be either performed in a Buddhist temple or in a garden publicly. People were present. So it would be dishonorable to your master to kind of just send his head rolling across the temple. So they would leave it by the flap of the skin, and that's how the kaishikunin would finish and kill the master. However, there is another form of seppuku called Jumonji giri, and just want to apologize for my accent or my pronunciation of words. I am not Japanese, and I am sick. So my pronunciation is probably not the best. But Jumonji giri, I think is how it's pronounced, probably wrong, but it was another form of seppuku, and what it was is instead of a kaishikunin being present, the samurai would do the whole thing himself. So what he would do is he would stab himself in the left abdomen, cut to the right, and then twist the blade up and cut directly up. And the reason he would do this is because that would then disembowel himself. So he would then sit there and bleed and die slowly. I think I read that it took about 30 minutes for Jumonji giri to, like, the process. So he would then sit there quietly, not making a noise, not fearful. He would just sit there stoically, die. Crazy. But that is what Jumonji giri was. So that is how it was performed. Let's talk about why it was performed. So there's a couple of reasons to why it was performed. When we talked about battlefield seppuku, that wouldn't be very ritualistic. A lot of the times battlefield seppuku would be, they would just cut the stomach, or they would, kaishikunin would behead their master. If they were in a castle, sometimes they would fling themselves from the walls. And the reason it was performed, it was because it was to avoid either capture, it was dishonorable to be captured by the enemy, or if you were defeated by another samurai, sometimes the samurai, in respect for you as another samurai, would allow you to do seppuku. And the reason you would do this instead of just the samurai killing is because if you did seppuku, it was a way for you to keep your honor in death. Another reason you would do it is because it would keep your family name pure. So your family could keep their honor, your family could keep their land. If you died dishonorably, a lot of times your family would be dishonored, and they would lose their class, and they would lose their land and stuff like that. So it was a way for not only you to keep your honor, but your family to keep your honor. So that was how it was done on the battlefield. Other reasons it was done, it would be for, rarely, but sometimes if your lord died, as a last gesture of your complete undying loyalty to your lord, you would commit seppuku if your lord died or was defeated or something like that. Another form of seppuku was called kashi, I believe. And what that was is, if you had a lord and you strongly disagreed with him, he did something that you just did not agree with, what you would do is you would go quietly and privately commit seppuku. You would cut yourself, you would bandage it, put on your kimono, go in front of your lord, publicly denounce him, say that you did, this is wrong, I don't agree with you, I'm denouncing you as my lord. Then you would reveal the mortal wound, and then you would eventually die, probably soon after that. But that was another form of seppuku. Also for criminals, seppuku was for samurai and daimyo criminals. whether it's war criminals or anything like that, or if you lost your honor at all, if you did something dishonorable, if you failed in some way and you lost your honor, it was a way for you to regain your honor. And again, for your family to keep their honor. So it was very honor-based. It wasn't just something they did just to kill people. It was a way, it was almost like a mercy, like a grace, like you're going to die either way, but here you can die honorably. And it wasn't just for men. Women also could commit seppuku. And the way the women would commit seppuku is they'd either do it like a man and cut their belly, or they would cut their throat. They would slit their jugular. But one thing the women did that varied from the men is that they would, before they committed seppuku, they would bind their legs. That way when they died, they wouldn't land in a less than desirable position. Their legs would be binded together. So reasons women would do it would be the same as men. If they lost their husband, sometimes they would commit seppuku, or to avoid capture. If a woman is captured, it's obviously pretty bad for her, especially in kind of feudal and medieval times. So to avoid rape and the things that go with that, a lot of times they would commit seppuku to avoid that kind of pain. So that's why it was done. So let's just talk about some wrapping ideas and some wrapping thoughts I have about this. So one thing that I think about history is, I study history because I love history, but I also think we can learn from history. I think that's why we should study history, is to not only learn from the mistakes, but also learn from the successes of the past. In seppuku, as brutal and as harsh as it is, I think we can learn something from it. In today's Western culture, suicide is very looked down upon. And I think it should be. Suicide, it's a very hard topic. A lot of times it's desperate people who think they have nothing left. They have nowhere to go in life. It's sometimes viewed as, I'm not saying these are my opinions, but sometimes it's viewed as selfish. Sometimes a man feels like he has nothing to do or nowhere to go in life, and he commits suicide and he leaves behind his family, so it's sometimes considered selfish. A lot of times if bad people commit mass murder, they'll kill themselves at the end of it to avoid capture or punishment by the law. It's just very looked down upon. But in Japan, it wasn't. It was actually honorable for you to commit suicide. And I think that's because of how it was done. It wasn't something quick and clean and just a gun to the head and pull the trigger kind of thing. It was very slow, ritualistic. There was a lot of time for the samurai to be like, nope, I'm out of here. But he didn't. He would be calm and he would be stoic. He would write that death poem, and he had to be honorable and he had to be calm about it. He couldn't show fear. He couldn't show second guessing, or he would lose that honor and lose that right. And I'm not saying that that is a good thing. I'm not saying we should all buy tattoos and if we do something wrong, just go ahead and cut ourselves in the belly and have a kaishikunin present. But I think we should put more value in honor, like they did because of their Bushido code. And if you don't know what the Bushido code is, it is the Japanese form of the honor code. It is how they lived. And I think we can learn from that and put more value in honor. A lot of times today, if we mess up or if we do something dishonorable, if we cheat or scam someone, we either kind of get like a slap on the wrist or kind of just like, oh, well, and it can be in anything. It can be in politics and business. Sometimes people will be like, oh, that's the way it's done, but not them. And I really think we can learn from that, because I really think more should be put towards honesty and honor and morals, because these people valued it so much that even if they didn't do something that was worthy of death, even if they didn't kill someone and they were getting capital punishment, like even if they just did something to dishonor their family, maybe they failed in a task, or a samurai was granted a mission and he failed the mission, he would commit seppuku to regain honor from that mission. How many times do we fail and oh well, get them next time? They just valued it so much, and I think that's very important for us to learn from and to study from. The process they went about it was very brutal and very extreme, but it's also almost admirable that they were able to do this and put so much value in honor. So that's kind of my just thoughts on it. I really find it interesting. I found it so interesting I had a tattoo based on it. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. Let me know your thoughts, or if you had any kind of comments or something to add about this, go ahead and send me a comment about it. Other than that, next week I should probably have the cutting tests for the falchion out. I'm going home this weekend and I'll probably be doing the cutting test on Saturday, so during the week I'll try to edit that video and clip that footage and have it to you guys next Friday. Other than that, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you liked the video. Stay tuned for next week's video. Cheers friends, class dismissed.